Right. Well, it is 3 after. I'm sure people will still be popping on that are able to make it today. We will let them join or send recordings for those that were able to be here this morning. But thank you all for joining. Excited that you're here to chat about our topic today: 3 signs that you need a UX designer, with Allie leading the way. Um, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with Pixo, so just real quickly, a recap. We are a software consultancy in Champaign-Urbana, and we create custom websites, software, and applications that address unique challenges. I'm Danielle, and I'm the account executive at Pixo, and I'm really happy and excited to help facilitate today's webinar. We have a lot to share that might spark a lot of questions. We are happy to have you throw things in the chat, or you can certainly unmute yourself and ask as well as we go through this. And I would also like my other teammates to introduce themselves. So Jenna, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Jenna Fry. I'm the account coordinator here at Pixo. I'll be handling the details today, so I'll be putting some helpful information into the chat for you throughout Allie's presentation. Like Danielle said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you're welcome to share those in the chat. I'll be sure to notice them and make sure Allie addresses them. If you'd rather ask your questions directly, we will have time for a Q&A after the presentation today, so there can be some live back and forth. And if a question comes up after the webinar, or if you'd like to connect with Danielle and Allie after our time today, excuse me, you're welcome to reach out to us afterwards and we can schedule some time to chat. And lastly, you probably heard as you entered the room, we are recording the webinar today and we'll be sharing that with you afterward.
Thank you, Jenna. And last but not least, I'm going to turn over the main part of the event over to Allie to introduce herself and get started on this topic today.
All right. So I'm sharing my screen, right? All right, just want to make sure there. So yes, I'm going to kick off this with sharing 3 signs that you need a UX designer. So first, I just want to introduce what UX design is, tell you a little bit about myself, my background, and then just what to expect to be hearing today. So let's jump in. So user experience, or UX, is really a ubiquitous term these days, so much so that it's really not uncommon to hear newscasters and experts really criticize the poor user experience whenever there is a stumbled launch of a high-profile website or app. Think of some things like healthcare.gov or even the COVID vaccine signups. But while this nerdy discipline may have reached mainstream status, the depth of UX goes way beyond a soundbite. And to make matters even more complicated, UX can be used as an umbrella term for a lot of different specialties. So what does it really mean when someone says that they want good UX? They're really saying, in my opinion, that they want using technology to be frictionless, to make their life easier, not harder. So no matter who a user is, they want everyday things to work well, like buying a train ticket for the right day and time and with the right fare for them, or paying a power bill on time and being certain where that money will be withdrawn, checking their kids' soccer schedules and getting them where they need to be on time. And just as importantly, whether you're an Amtrak executive, the CEO of a power company, or the soccer coach, it's really critical that your users, real people with real lives and real problems, get the information they need from your digital platforms, and that they aren't frustrated with you and your software while they are doing it. So to achieve a good user experience, people must be able to instinctively and consistently understand how to navigate the site, app, or system. Often that's what everyone wants, from the business side of an organization to the person who's sitting down at the interface trying to find their bank statement. Yet getting there is a lot harder than most people imagine. I'm sure you all here have used a product that was really difficult to find something that you needed. So creating a good user experience requires effort, shared understanding, and really a willingness to emphasize and acknowledge that how you see the world isn't the same as others do. So now that we kind of know what UX is a little bit more, if you didn't before coming in here, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself and why you should listen to me about user experience. So my job as a UX designer is really to help organizations achieve that good UX, that good user experience. So I help organizations better understand their users' needs and perspectives. I help teams align on and identify problems to solve. I help visualize a system to build shared understanding amongst the team who's building it, and also ensure it aligns with the model of the people who use it. So just a little bit more about myself. I consider myself to be a creative realist. I love making sense of messes and chaos. I love living in a world of post-it notes and organizing those. My past experience is in industrial design and graphic design, but I really found my calling in UX design and working in those digital spaces and products. I've worked at Pixo for 6+ years now and have experience untangling some pretty gnarly systems, things like websites, web apps, mobile apps, product interfaces that integrate with hardware. All of the above is what I consider to be a system, a digital system. All right. So I just wanted to pause a little bit and just see who's all here. So feel free to come off camera, say hi. And I'm curious if you want to put in chat or come off mute. And is there anyone here that is currently managing a digital product? So maybe that's your organization's public-facing website, an internal tool that employees use, or a product that your organization sells, anything like that. Does anyone do that here? It's okay if you don't. I was just curious. Another question I had was if anyone is a UX designer here or is interested in exploring UX design. I know we had a couple folks from that area. Everyone's so quiet for a Thursday. Well, we expect to hear, yeah, anyone from, this is really going to be what I'm going to share today is focused mostly on if you do manage those digital products, maybe your organization has a different product like a website or an app, anything like that, that you might be responsible for managing or working on, but also if you're just interested in UX and what it's like to work with a UX designer for future, this is a great, I hope to share that knowledge here today. So big question is that might be on your mind right now is, do you need a UX designer? You might be asking yourself that, and that's probably why you signed up today. So today I'm going to be sharing some top signs that I've seen an organization should be collaborating, why an organization should be collaborating with a UX designer on their digital products. You'll get an insight peek into what it's like to work alongside me and how I've helped organizations in the past with some classic UX approaches to solving problems. And yeah.
And I promise I actually won't interrupt too much during Allie's presentation, but I just wanted to put out there that there's probably no way she can cover everything. So she's been gracious enough to limit this to 3 signs. But I'm sure there'll be more that you can ask or share. And after this webinar, if we don't get to something Q&A, Allie is going to open up some one-on-one options if you would like to meet with her personally for a UX consult. So 15-minute sessions, you can ask some questions directly to her. Pixo really loves doing our webinars and sharing, but an hour is never long enough to really get the wealth of knowledge that our consultants have. So we'd love to offer that option for those that join and want to dig in more with our consultants. So I will turn it back over to Allie. I promise not to interrupt, but I just wanted to put that out there too.
Absolutely. All right. So let's dive in to see what I have in store. So starting with number 1 here. So a big sign that you need a UX designer is if you've never watched someone use your website or application. So when was the last time you really sat down and saw someone trying to find something on your website? Or maybe it's a colleague try to use that internal tool that you manage. An interface that's intuitive to you isn't necessarily intuitive to someone else. So let me say that again. An interface that's intuitive to you isn't necessarily intuitive to others. And I see this every single day. I really had to learn as a UX designer and try to teach this to other people that you can't rely on your own assumptions. Just because it's easy for you to use and find that information does not mean it makes sense to someone else. And I'm going to kind of dive into why. So really, the problem is digital spaces are notoriously hard to understand. Our worlds are made up of things, and humans use things to understand what they can do and how things work. So let me take you on a little journey here. Here's a actual physical space, right? I walk into here and I see a person is at the desk, maybe it's the receptionist. I see there are chairs, people are sitting in some of those chairs. When you walk into a physical space like this, you really look at the objects first before you even think about what you can do with them. This type of understanding for most of us is second nature. You're using your lizard brain really to understand the room and the space. It's not conscious thinking for most of us when we're dealing with the physical world. But digital environments are also made up of things. And when we approach a new digital space like a website, we are also looking for those relevant objects to get our bearings in the same way we approached walking into that doctor's office. So if I'm using an app like Spotify, I might be going there to look for my playlist. If I'm on a bank site and I'm going there to find my bank statement so I can see what bill I need to pay. If I'm on, I don't know, a meetup app and I want to find an event in the city I'm visiting, I'm looking for events in a specific area. So once you find those and make a mental map of that digital space, you start to think about how can you interact with those things? How can I share that playlist with a friend? How can I pay that bill? The problem really is that digital environments are very abstract. The location of things are not always easy for people to find. So, for example, when was the last time, or where would you find a toy from your childhood or toys? Where did you store those toys? Maybe they were in a specific room or a box, a toy box or something. Picture that in your mind. Where are your keys right now? Are they near you? Are they in your purse? Are they near a door? Are they hanging up somewhere? Now, where is your digital resume in the cloud? How would you tell someone to get there and find it? Which of these three was easier to both remember and describe to someone? I'm guessing for most of us that resume and where it's located in the cloud, what file folder it's in, was going to be more difficult to explain than, hey, my keys are next to the door hanging up on the third ring. So that's sadly a common experience in our digital environments. Navigating them is much more abstract than our physical environments. This makes interacting with them to complete tasks or find information to be that much more difficult. So as a UX designer, how I approach this problem is by better understanding people's mental models. My goal with user research is really to understand how someone thinks about something today, their mental model of it. This includes the terms they use, the steps they take to complete tasks, and why that is important or valuable to them. Different words have a lot of different meanings, depending on your unique mental model and the domain you're in. So for example, if I'm designing a tool for a farmer whose domain is agriculture, the word crop refers to them and their domain is a plant, right? If I'm designing a tool for a photographer whose domain is maybe more in design, a design related industry, they would consider the word crop to mean editing an image. So my job really is to accurately represent things in a digital environment that match someone's real world experience to them. So that when they see terms that they recognize, they understand it. And so a little peek into how I do that, because you're probably wondering, well, how do you do that? It really comes down to talking to people in the form of a one-on-one interview. I ask questions like, how did you do things today? What are the steps you take? I'm looking for words they use, emotions they have about specific tasks. So really just even talking to 3 people that use your product or that are in that domain can be eye-opening and help your team build a better understanding of their real world problems they're facing, and also get an idea of the mental model and the terms they use so that you can then replicate it in your interface. The other way to know if things are represented well is by watching people interact with an interface. We call this usability testing officially, but essentially I give a person a task and watch them try to use the tool to complete it. So this image here, this is actually my colleague, Lindsay Markle. She's showing a product on an iPad to someone. She's sitting right next to them, watching them as they complete that task. What this is not is asking people what they want. What I'm doing here is listening. I'm observing people's reactions. I'm asking about their interpretation and seeing if it matches and the organization's intentions of it. So all of these inputs really build the foundation of better understanding how other people interact with and interpret an interface. So the most important part of observing and talking to users is identifying those patterns in the experiences they share and identifying opportunities to then make that even better. So this can be a really grueling process though, but the insights that come from it are always really, really valuable. So I wanted to show you a little bit behind the curtain. So I'm often working in these massive spreadsheets like this, where I collect all of those interview and usability notes. I tag them by things like emotion, where it was located in the product, the task they were trying to complete. And then I start to identify ways to improve the product, suggestions almost, that really a team can work with and iterate on. So for example, I recently conducted a usability test, and this was for an informational website whose goal was really to help people like data scientists compare machine learning models. Think like algorithms that are used in self-driving cars or apps that can identify a plant in an image, stuff that everyday people might not really recognize or understand, right? But this was for people like data scientists that knew what these things were. So when I gave them a task, I asked a participant really to if they could find citation information about that specific machine learning model. So I wanted to see if they could find this on the website. The information was on the screen somewhere. It was at the bottom of the page, near the footer actually. And every single participant in the study couldn't find the information. Some actually went past it. They were on it and they just couldn't find it. So they could not complete that task, right? So my suggestion to our team is really simply to make more clear that that information and links are available at the bottom of the page, right? So our team took that observation and that suggestion to improve it, because we knew finding that information was really important, and came up with actually a lot of different solutions. And one being, so the footer or the area where this information was actually had a really dark colored background. It was a dark blue and it matched the footer of the page. So one assumption we had was when they scrolled, they just thought that was the footer and they weren't even looking at it. They scanned right past it. And so what we did and what we tried out, since that was an easy change, just changing the color of a background, that was very simple for our engineering team. So we made the background white. We also added a jump link. So what a jump link is at the very top of the page, we had a link that said, view more information about this model. You click it and it brings you down to that section. And so then we tested this out. We said, I brought in another, group of participants, and I asked them that same task, where did you go to find this? And all of them were able to find with that information, both by using that link, they would select it, and some just scrolled and saw it right away. And that was important. So we wanted to make sure that information was important for people to find, and observing them having difficulty finding it allowed us to really craft a solution and see if we could make it better, more easier to find, and test that again. So success. So some takeaways here. Digital interfaces are really the Wild West. Anyone can put anything anywhere. And this makes them really unintuitive and difficult to navigate. So because of our unique mental models and positions in different domains, how you experience and interpret an interface is likely not the same as someone else. So first step before investing in any changes is identifying where those problems are, and do that really by talking to users, observing how they use your product today. If you don't, you could be really investing in effort in the wrong spots, right? You could be fixing something that's not a problem and avoiding fixing things that are actually giving your users trouble. All right, question time. So I saw some more people come on in here. I'm just going through the first big sign that you need a UX designer, which is if you've never watched someone use your website. I'm curious if anyone here has any specific challenges you're facing. I haven't been looking at chat, so I'm sorry, but this can be very informal too. So does anyone have any just questions about what I shared so far? What's on your mind? Nothing. All right. I'm going to keep going to some second ones, but if you do have anything, feel free to throw it in chat there. So my next sign, number 2, that you need a UX designer is really that you're not sure your digital product is helping accomplish your business goal. So do you ever struggle knowing what idea or feature to prioritize first? Maybe are you swimming in ideas and conflicting priorities from different parts of your organization? This is the problem I see is that really organizations can easily invest time in places that don't support their users. Interfaces like websites and apps support the people who use them. If people don't feel supported, meaning they can't find a critical piece of information or can't complete a task, your business can suffer. Unfortunately, it can be really exciting and often easier for organizations to focus on the innovative and new idea that they have, and really disregarding the basic or otherwise simple functionality that users expect first. And this is a real problem, and I've seen it time and time again. So a website, app, or system is really a direct reflection of your organization. This means people's experience with simple tasks like scheduling an auto payment on a credit card or just logging into the application alone. If people can't complete their task or if they have a negative experience trying to, they're not going to rely on your organization for helping them achieve other tasks in the future. So you can't run before you can walk. So how can you better prioritize work so that you're not alienating your users? So the UX approach to this problem is really by prioritizing work strategically based on your users' understanding. So UX designers often have this unique perspective of being in the middle between an organization, the users, and the engineers building the product. So by talking to stakeholders in an organization, I understand what goals they're driving for. By brainstorming solutions with engineers, I see how much effort and cost goes into them. And by talking to users, I know what tasks they're trying to complete and why they value being able to complete it. So how do I help organizations and teams make good decisions about what to prioritize? I have 3 steps for this, and it's really a tiered thing. So you've got to start with the foundation. You've got to do step 1, then step 2, then step 3. So let's look at this first one, which is essentially meeting people's basic expectations, the bare minimum that someone expects that site, the app or system to do for them. It's the core functionality in your system. Sometimes we refer to this as the minimal viable product or MVP, if you're familiar with that term. But let me give you an example here. So if I am working on a product that helps people, say, see what books are available at their local library, it's safe to assume a basic expectation a user has is that they can search for a book by a title and get confirmation of its availability and probably location so they could actually go pick it up, right? That is a task that can be executed and completed, right? Like we can make that functionality, we can build that out at its bare minimum, right? Now, that alone, though, might not be clear for someone. So step 2 is really, once you have that core, those basic expectations of that functionality met, then you can really start to make sure that people can find what they need and that it's easy to understand. So it's going back to that domain stuff. That is this a crop for a plant or is it a crop for cropping an image, right? Like making sure you're using those right terms. And for a product, so you really want to make sure that this is both 2 parts, navigation and understanding, like I said, the terms they use. So for example, let's go back to that library website. What if people can't find the search bar? Then they can't complete that task of putting a title in. Or if they can't find on the screen where it says the book is located or available, or if it's checked out or not, right? So those are all things about building understanding and that findability. So that's the next step that you need to make sure is working before you can get to the third one, which is adding opportunities of delight and things that exceed expectation or reduce time. So again, once basic understanding is met and once basic expectations are met, then we can turn our attention to adding these opportunities of delight. So these are things that both, again, like reduce the time. So maybe that task takes them quite long to do, and there are steps you can kind of find through testing. You can take out of that experience and make it quicker for them to do. And that would be really helpful, right? So for example, that library example here, having the ability on the library website to maybe save books. You want to check out to a list later so that when you go to the library, you can find all those books or something. That's really a nice to have, right? And probably would make your users really delighted. What wouldn't make them delighted is if they had that feature, but they couldn't find the search bar to search for a title, right? That would be frustrating. Or they can't understand if it's checked out or not. So who cares if I can save it to a list if I can't even tell if it's available? So prioritize meeting those basic expectations first. Get the version working. Next, test it with users, see how they interpret it, what terms are confusing, if the organization of information is right, if interactions are clear. Make sure people can find what they need and it's easy to understand. Then get to those cool opportunities to exceed expectations. So instead of organizations, which I often see drowning in this, it's a bunch of ideas and feature sets from different parts of the organization. Everyone wants these cool things, and it's really a question of how do we prioritize them? As a UX designer, I really try to focus on prioritizing things that invest in that critical functionality first and then building upon it. So starting, again, you can't run before you can walk. You got to start basic here. So some takeaways here. Your digital products are a direct reflection of your business. If you alienate users and your business, if you're alienating users and your business and how people perceive you, your business will suffer, right? So prioritize based on user needs, starting with setting the foundation and building upon it by gaining more understanding and adding opportunities of delight last. All right. Let's look at our third one here. So another sign you might need a UX designer, and I see this often, is that your current digital product is difficult to maintain and use. So what I mean by this, some good signs of this are maybe you have a list of workarounds that you use to complete a task. You get a lot of calls from people who have trouble finding what they need. Does your organization fall apart if one person leaves because they had all the knowledge of how that system worked and what you needed to do in it? Maybe it's difficult to onboard new people if it's an internal tool, right? I often see this is big documents of screenshots with arrows of that screen showing you how to do a task. That tells me that might not be intuitive for someone, that there's some problems there that we need to explore. So just some telltale signs that your site or your app or system is hard to use. And the problem is that systems really aren't built in a way to adapt to future needs. So as organizations change their own processes and services, their digital products really need to adapt to. And unfortunately, we run into limitations with our systems, and rebuilding is the only way really to adapt them, right? So for organizations that use a digital platform to run their business or interact with their users, or is the product that they actually sell, it can be really intimidating and costly to start from scratch. And I understand that. We see that often. And we know that when systems are reflections of their domain, they're often more intuitive to users and easier to navigate. This means that terms, again, are easily recognizable. Workflows in the system on the screen match the workflow someone would take in the physical world. And over time, we see that systems that have trouble adapting to those natural changes that are going to happen in your domain and organization, these products can drift away from reality a bit and become increasingly difficult for people to use over time. So the UX approach to this problem is really to confront complexity early and build shared understanding amongst your team. Creating a flexible system that lasts involves confronting this complexity from the start. And this is where I really thrive as a UX designer. So is really kind of before anything has been built or defined or redesigned, right? When we get to a chance to help organizations build a shared understanding of the needs of their users so it can inform the new architecture of the product. So I often help organizations synthesize that research that we got and then their business goals into what we call is information architecture. And I like to think about it as really it builds the foundation for both the database and then the front end, the user interface. So my goal here when we're looking at this bottom foundation is really to uncover false assumptions way before you go into the design and development. Really so you can avoid being in the same position down the road. This also helps avoid costly rework when in more complex design and development phases. So how do I do this? Essentially, it's forcing you and the team to put everything under a microscope so we can make informed decisions about how the system works and why, and identify the most critical pieces. So here are just some screenshots. This involves a lot of post-it notes, a lot of long conversations, a lot of models and visualizations. But as you look at this is really low fidelity, right? Like this is we're getting out all of the complexity now in this form. And this is often done with everyone in a team. So I will bring in stakeholders from a whole company. Like we want to hear from everyone, because again, this is low fidelity. We want to hear from everyone at this point, not when it's built and completed. So we'll have stakeholders involved. We'll have engineers, our designers, our content strategists, the whole team. It's really important that you have shared understanding. That's really where I see power. You want, for me, I want an organization to understand their system, understand the user's needs, and for everyone else, so that you don't get those swoop and poopers that come in and say, I need this feature, and you're like, well, that doesn't really fit, or why doesn't that fit? Because it's not meeting user needs. So again, having those conversations is really, really important, and a big piece of my job is helping organizations make sense of it in this way. So big takeaway here is that rebuilding a system can be costly. And if you're going to make that investment, you want to make informed decisions about how to update your product so it meets your needs and lasts. And a UX designer can really help you plan for the future by identifying all the needs up front, facilitating those conversations before any effort has been invested in design and development. I'm going to pause here because I know this section I went through a little quickly, and there's a lot that I'm not talking about here about how I do this stuff. But if anyone has any specific questions or wants to get into what you're seeing here, I'm happy to pause a little bit. This is definitely a big one for organizations and can be, yeah, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, the UX toolbox, I like to say, to help facilitate these conversations and model different things. So after hearing those 3 real signs, I'm kind of curious, do any of these signs resonate with you? When is the last time you really watched someone use your website? Do you know the terms that they use or what problems they're trying to solve? How often are people complaining or having trouble completing a task? Did you get lots of calls? Do you find yourself fearing someone in your organization who has all of the knowledge? You're fearing that they're going to leave because they have all of the knowledge for that internal software. Are you unsure what to fix first, where to put effort? Are you part of a committee of people with different views and priorities? Those can be really hard and challenging. Yeah, the way really that UX designers approach these challenges can be really worthwhile and helpful, and if anything, supporting. So if I sparked any ideas in your head about your own organization's digital tools, or you want help assessing different usability problems, definitely reach out to me. I'd love to talk more in detail, of course. But I know we'll have some time here for some Q&A. So yeah, let's just kick that off here. Any questions anyone out here has?
I know sometimes it's a little intimidating to come off of mute. In our last webinar, and I don't know if this directly applies to all the things you were talking about, Allie, but there was a question about focus groups. And it was kind of related to your user testing. You were talking about, I don't know, Jenna, if you still have that question somewhere that we could pull what they actually asked. Perfect. Yeah, I was like, I knew it was about focus groups, and I wanted to ask you about this, Allie. Yeah, do you use focus groups to uncover how actual visitors use and interact with a site? What's the difference between what you said and focus groups?
Yeah. So one thing, no, it's very, very different. They're very different things. And I definitely do not use focus groups and do not recommend them, mostly because they're misleading. Having a group of people, you don't get to see the actual struggles that people have. And there's a lot of people will latch on to what other people are saying, and that'll influence them. So that's really not good. When I do even usability tests, it's important to be just one-on-one with one person. Again, so you don't get just these influences from other people. And people won't share really what the problems are, or will try to tell you what you want to hear. So the difference with usability testing is really, I'm not asking, do you like this? Is this, do you enjoy this type of things? I'm not asking that at all. I'm at least on the UX camp of, I just want to observe how you'd complete a task. That's really where I like to focus, because I've seen, if I can watch someone and how they move around an interface, I can see where they pause or might have a struggle. And then I can ask that, like, oh, what were you trying to do there? Oh, what does that mean to you, that term? Or what are you looking for that you can't find? Different questions like that really can tell you more about if your product is usable or not. And also if they understand what's there. So sometimes it's not even about the interactions, it's about the content on the website. So, this past usability test I had was just basic understanding of, do you know what this is? Do you know what this website is? And that was, how I approached that question was, I showed them the screen and I said, so just talk to me about what you see here, what you think you can do here, who do you think this is for, right? And that when they give me a little narrative about it, that's really helpful to understand, did that meet what the organization intended or not? That's really what I'm looking for. Not so much an opinion. And we get opinions. Sometimes you have to take opinions with a grain of salt. We will get a lot of things like, oh, I love this color. Oh, I hate that color. And it's like, yes, but is it usable? Could you find that information? That's where my focus usually is with these, because that's where we know how something looks is very different than, can they find that information? Can they use it?
There was a question that got added to the chat. Allie, I can read that out loud for you.
Yeah.
Adani asked, what are some tips for prioritizing issue areas? Sometimes it feels like a loop. We can't fix this until we fix this part, but how can we fix it when we need to update this part? Kind of contingency prioritization issue.
Ooh,
Can you speak
yes.
to that?
This is a huge one. This is something I think deal with quite often, and it takes the whole team. So really, it's like I really found power in having everyone understand those dependencies, putting those all out there for people to see. I'm a visual person, so what I like to do is pull up a screen of Post-it notes. I love to, be able to see what all those pieces are and which ones are related, and then which ones are dependent, and make almost a map or a plan, right, with those. I would also, so what I shared of like prioritizing which ones are critical, again, like using that template of which ones are those basic, like if I find a major bug in bugs that you find, those probably should be top priority. But anything that are critical to navigating, you want to prioritize those first. So if people can't find stuff, that's really where I always go, like, that's a critical thing that we need to fix. You'll also find though, just because I come back with all of these usability problems, we have to weigh it against the effort it takes to do those things. So oftentimes, like for a project I'm working on currently, we have a big navigation problem that I really want to fix, but it involves changing the database and adding more things, more attributes for certain content metadata to this piece. And it's going to take a lot of work. So we discussed it's coming up, but we can get these low hanging fruit done first. We can fix some of these more bugs that are, or, address things like changing content is really easy. Changing, like I said, that those colors of things, helping with interactive pieces. And that sometimes really is hard because I want to fix that big problem that I know, but we needed to understand that effort, we just kind of compare those. There is a good matrix I use often. I will find that and share that. It's pretty much just a matrix of effort versus impact to users. So a big matrix here. And what we do is we plot those changes we want to make. So I will usually come in and say, based on testing, this is going to have a big user impact. So it goes all the way over here. And on the other side of it, our engineers and our team, depending on the solution, can say, ooh, that's going to take a lot of effort. So we also plot that. So, it might be easier effort. I'm going to try to show this on here. I should stop sharing my screen. It's easy effort means like it's going to take a half a day or something. And a lot of effort is it's going to take a long time. So what comes into this quadrant here is things that are easy to do and also going to really be valuable to users. And we usually prioritize those first. And other things below, things that are going to take longer, but are really, top priority, that's going to be at the top of the backlog. I know when dependencies get into it, we also just like to focus in on a certain area of the product. So again, going back to what's your basic functionality and starting there, focusing on that area, improving that a little bit, then going to another area of your site and prioritizing that and saving things, making a backlog of all the things that you're going to need to do later. Again, we have a big list of those. Hope that helps, Adani.
So it's not easy. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. All of that to say, yes, I feel you. It is challenging. Definitely could, yeah, there are some tips, but it can just be a lot of conversations. Another thing I wanted to share when I keep talking about shared understanding is it really does help to have your team, really everyone in the room making decisions, understand the different parts and why they work. And for me, often that's sharing in usability testing why this is important for a user. And so again, if you know a problem, if you can get someone and oftentimes I'm recording these interviews or I take quotes and say, this person cannot complete this task. We need to fix this, so coming to the table with that information and making sure everyone understands that is really important and can move those conversations along a lot easier, so that you're, again, just more efficient at getting things fixed faster and helping those priorities kind of move through.
We still have time for more questions if anybody does want to unmute themselves and ask away.
I'm very curious to hear what challenges you all, and if any of these resonated with you. I'm very curious, has anyone experienced this, any of these?
I can give kind of a testimonial of a memory I have with a client experiencing UX issues. Right after the pandemic hit, I remember a couple of our clients in the public facing sector needing to get new important information to the public quickly because of rules that had changed because of the pandemic. And one of the signs that they needed to do that was they were getting a lot of phone calls asking these questions. So when you said the phone call example, that kind of jogged my memory when things happen, as we've learned they inevitably do, like global pandemics, your UX needs could change over time. I'm wondering, Ali, if you can think of any other examples like that where something shifted in the organization and UX needs you needed to reprioritize because of external factors or stakeholders changed and internal priorities changed because different opinions were in the room, etc. So how do you respond to that as a designer?
Yeah, that happens often. And mostly I've really seen the shift in business goals changing, and that how that really affects where you're going to prioritize things. So for example, sometimes I've seen where an organization doesn't really know who their audience is. They think they do. And then luckily there's user research, and that really can shift and change. And that changes the priority of the website, right? Like what were we going to focus on? And actually, you know, that's really helpful because as we know, broad websites for everyone are really, maybe we don't know this, but broad websites for everyone aren't helpful. It's really good to be very specific about who your users are, and being able to support them is a lot easier when you know that. I don't know of another example. The calling one is a good one of just, yeah, when an environment really changes and you need to, and that was hard because there's a lot of, again, this is where we go back to systems maybe not being able to adapt to those changes, and you have to come up with some workarounds. You can do a lot with content. I just want to throw that out there and call out to my fellow content strategists. There's a lot you can do with your messaging that really does not involve a lot of development work. So oftentimes we think we need something major, a major change to how we, you know, maybe it's adding a whole new section or area of the website or a whole new feature to be able to do something like this, but just communicating well is really important. Being clear about those terminologies in your navigation, making sure those things make sense. And that's usually, again, that can be a lot of the low-hanging fruit on the effort side of development, at least.
Shivanand, I believe you came off mute for a second. Do you have a question for Ali?
Yeah. Hi, Ali. Shivanand here. Could you explain more about that project slide, system model, and the object map that you have shown? What was the project about, and what kind of goal you have achieved regarding that?
Absolutely, yes. Everyone seen my screen here? Yeah. Let me go back to this one. Is this the screen you're talking about? Yes, okay. Yes, so this is actually a lot of the things you're seeing here is from the process called object-oriented user experience. And that is a methodology for really documenting and understanding complex systems. And so I use a lot of that. So these different things like an object map, a call to action matrix, these nested object matrix. What we're doing here is essentially talking about what objects make up a system, how do they relate to one another. So that's with this nested object matrix. The calls to action, so what you can take, what actions you can take on those objects, why you would do that, which ones, you know, how to prioritize them, and also the attributes related to those objects. So this is meant from a specific project, but I use these different pieces when we start different projects and really to build that foundation. This is really helpful. Again, so before I even get into wireframing anything, I start here at this level. This allows me really, what I found to be so valuable is we can get down to those details. So if I'm building a, let's see here, an app, this is actually a pet project of mine, pet is fitting, an app for documenting behavior in your cats. So this was an app so that I could see if my cats, their behavior problems like urinating outside of the litter box and getting in fights with other cats, tracking that so I can see if it's a behavioral problem or a medical problem. Anyway, I use this process to really understand, well, what needs to be, what are those objects in the app, right? So actually, I wonder if I can zoom in. Oh, maybe I can't. This is actually what I was looking at over here. So this app actually it's probably too small to read, but pets was like one of the objects I had. So then I had to figure out, well, what information would be related to the pet? The pet's name, the pet's age, the date of birth I have on here. Then I would, go into different things like the behavior of it, right? So if a cat, let's see, was fighting with another cat, I want to know what that behavior means. So maybe that would be, is it a positive behavior, negative behavior? Is there a reason, a description? Like, again, so this would be information for me as a user. If I saw my cats fighting, I would be able to understand what that behavior was and how to help it. So anyway, what I'm describing here with all that is I figured that out on these Post-it notes in this object map and have those conversations, understand what the content is going to be, understand how you can interact with that content. This all leads into those wireframes and designs and makes that process a lot easier. If you're interested in this, definitely check out Object-Oriented User Experience. It is a wonderful, wonderful process that has definitely changed how I think about user experience and how I approach projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali.
Yes.
Well, with just a few minutes before the hour, if you do have any other questions, happy to still hang out and answer those for a few minutes, or as mentioned before, Ali is going to offer one-on-one appointments with her. Sometimes you get into the weeds a little bit too much for one of these webinars to be useful for your project. So, certainly book that time with Ali, and she might be able to do some organizing with you and figuring out what is the best next step for you. But I appreciate everybody joining today, and we hope that you will join us again in future webinars. We hope to be having them on a pretty regular basis, monthly with our consultants, and you can find those on our LinkedIn page, or we can also send those to you directly via email so you can see what's coming up next.
Oh. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And yeah, please take advantage of if you want to talk to me more about anything UX related. I love to talk about this stuff and can definitely dive more into the weeds. So appreciate seeing everyone here. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.